I'm glad to be, I live in Madison, work in Madison, so I'm glad to be in this part of the state. It's good to get out of Madison every once in a while. As you can see, we're going to do something a little bit different here. Everybody should have one of these clickers in front of them. So please grab those. The bottom button, they're a little hard to see. It's an on-off button, so make sure the blue light goes on. If it doesn't, grab another one. I've left plenty of them around in case it does. It just means the battery's dead. And what you'll be able to do with these is vote, okay? So the buttons are lettered A through E, so I'll give you some choices, and then we'll be able to see how the group votes. Okay? Everybody with me on that? Don't worry, your responses are anonymous. I can't tell how each person voted if you're worried about that. In fact, if you're worried about it, I can turn my back and you can switch with somebody else, okay? One other thing to note on these things is there is no fast forward button, okay? So, nor is there a mute button, so you can't shut me up with this thing. So let's give it a try. One of the things you have to keep in mind is the upper left corner here, there's a box. When the green box is open, it means the polls are open so you can vote, okay? Sometimes I forget to open the poll, so if that green box isn't on and I ask you to vote, please let me know. So here's what I want you to do right now. I want you to vote. And I want you to press A if you think the statement is true, and I want you to press B if you think it's false. A is true, B is false, okay? Faith and trust in government are on the increase in Wisconsin. A, true, B, false. Polls are open. Go ahead and vote. All right, we got about 15 people voting. Would you like to see the results? I'm going to close the polls, see what you came up with. Oh. All right, so we have 15 people voted. 12 of you said the statement faith and trust in government are on the increase in Wisconsin. 12 of you said that statement is false, right? And 3 of you apparently are from Minnesota, is what I'm guessing. Okay. Well, here's the thing. The reason I asked that question, first of all, is just give you a chance to play with the clickers a little bit here. But the open meetings law, the open records law, and the ethics laws are really the foundation of trust in government in Wisconsin. But if you don't do things right procedurally, you don't look trustworthy, right? If you don't look good while you're doing something, even if you know what you're doing, if you don't look like you know what you're doing, people aren't going to trust that. So we want to get your procedures right too. So what I'm going to do is quickly go through some steps of parliamentary procedures so that you can get things right during your meetings, okay? Now, I get to ask you questions. You can ask me questions at any time, okay? So any time as we go through this, go ahead and ask questions, all right? So let me ask another question. How many of you have, just raised your hand, how many of you have ever been to a bad meeting? You know I've been to some bad meetings. My notes sometimes look like that, right? So you're sitting there, you end up doodling, you're waiting for the meeting to get started. It doesn't start on time, and once it does, you wish it hadn't, because it takes 90 minutes to get 10 minutes worth of work done. Anybody ever been to a meeting like that? So if you follow some of these procedures, some of these tips I'm going to give you, it can help you have more effective meetings. I'm not going to guarantee that you will never, ever have another bad meeting, though. So don't get me wrong. I don't think your meetings are disasters like the Ukrainian parliament here. This photo was taken 6 years ago now, but so they have real serious problems in the parliament there. This was before the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. I can't imagine what they're like now. But I want you to notice this other picture was taken from that same session. So a brawl breaks out, right? And as you can notice here, you have the leaders of parliament. They're up on stage. They're dressed in suits. And can you tell from the back of the room they're splattered with eggs here? Can you see that? And you see these guys are huddled behind an umbrella. So I had to ask myself, how bad did things have to be that when you left your home in the morning, you took an umbrella with you to the meeting because you knew you were going to have food thrown at you, right? Right? So I know your meetings aren't that bad. Actually, I was giving this presentation down in southeast Wisconsin. I said, I know your meetings aren't that bad. And they said, you should come to some of our meetings. And what they were saying is they were having trouble with not so much board members, but members of the public coming up and having things break out. All right. So let's talk about parliamentary procedure. When I talk about parliamentary procedure, we're talking about Robert's Rules of Order because that's the parliamentary authority that has been adopted by most units of government in Wisconsin. How many of you have ever studied Robert's Rules of Order or parliamentary procedure? Either FFA, 4-H, Student Council, anybody? Not many, okay, but a handful have. So this is probably what you learned, but keep in mind that this book, this Bible, it's hard to get through. There are 2 chapters, 49 and 50, for small boards and committees. Most units of government, except for county boards and some big cities, fall under the auspices of the chapters 49 and 50, small boards and committees, which Roberts defines as about a dozen members or less. Anybody from a board or council of more than a dozen members? Okay, so that's what we'll focus on today. Focus on those rules for small boards and committees, which are less formal than what you might have learned for student council. Okay? All right, so that's what we're going to do. Keep in mind, you can have your own local rules. So you don't like something in Roberts, you can adopt your own local rule. And if it conflicts with Roberts, which one do you think applies? The local rule, right? Because that's why you have that authority, that's why you adopted it. But of course, if local rules or Roberts conflict with state statutes apply. And what's a state statute that you can think of right off the bat that might conflict with Roberts when it comes to running meetings? Anybody? Open meetings law, right? Roberts lets you essentially basically talk about whatever you want at a meeting. Can you do that under the open meetings law? Of course not. You have to have 24-hour notice for what you talk about. So that's a case where state statutes conflicts with Roberts, so state statutes apply. Okay? All right. Now, if you violate Robert's Rules of Order, don't worry, there's no death penalty, right? In fact, there is no penalty. But again, you want to be able to conduct your business in a proper way so that when people are there, they understand that you know what you're doing, right? Now, let me skip that one. So, you have Robert's Rules of Order, you have local rules, you have state statutes. What about custom, okay? What about custom? We've always done it this way. So I want you to go, I'm going to let you go to the polls here, so take out your clickers and respond to this question. So you assume that the assembly, meaning your town board, your village council, your city council, your village board, your city council, has adopted Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. It's discovered that its usual way of doing business, okay, the council's usual way of doing business conflicts with the procedure described in Roberts. What should the assembly do? Should it A, follow the established past practice, because it's what we've always done, B, follow Roberts, C, adopt its own rule by a 2/3 vote or by unanimous consent, or D, ask the village attorney what to do? So go ahead and vote. All right, I'm going to close the polls, and we'll take a look here. All right. So let me say, so you're kind of split here, right? So let me go through this quickly. So ask the village attorney what to do. Well, we know that there are 4 people from the law office here, so we know which 4 said that, right? All right. All right. So that's always a good idea if you don't know what procedures to follow, to go ahead and ask your corporate counsel. So that's an okay answer. But what Roberts says is once it is, you've adopted Robert's Rules of Order, so you said you're going to follow Roberts. Once it's pointed out that you're not doing things properly and that what you're doing conflicts with Roberts, then you should change to what Roberts says. So whoever said B, follow Roberts, is correct. Okay? Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, it doesn't matter, this is the way we've always done it. No. If it's pointed out that it conflicts with Roberts and you've adopted Roberts, then you follow Roberts. Now, maybe that presents an occasion for you to do what? Adopt your own rule, right? Not that night, but later on, adopt a rule that says, this is how we're going to proceed in the future. Everybody with me on that? All right. So, what is Roberts? Essentially, meeting starts. We want to take some action. So Roberts is essentially this 8-step process. The first 4 steps are getting something before the assembly. The 5th step is the debate, the discussion, and then the final 3 are disposing of what you have presented. Now, the first step is obtain the floor, okay? Now, again, Roberts, the Bible, was written for assemblies of hundreds of people, right? So we're in a conventional, we have hundreds of people, and 20 of them want to talk at the same time. We have to have a formal procedure for figuring out who gets to talk, right? So how do you obtain the floor? If we have a town board of 3 people or 5 people, do we need a formal way of obtaining the floor? Not so much, right? So how do you obtain the floor in your groups? How does one obtain the floor? What do you do? So what happens? They just start talking, right? So somebody starts to talk, or somebody even makes a motion, right? And that's okay. We don't need any formal procedure because we're so small that we don't need it. It's okay if somebody starts to talk. And if 2 people start to talk, what usually happens? One of them says, you go ahead, right? That's okay. We don't have to wrap ourselves around the axle on how to obtain the floor here, right? So we get recognized by the presiding officer. The next step in the process is to make a motion. A motion, we're going to come back to this, is a proposal to take action. Okay, it's a proposal to do something. Robert says the way to do that is to say, I move that, right? Now, if somebody says, I make a motion to, whatever, paint the shed red, that's fine, okay? What about there's discussion going on, and then finally somebody says, well, you know what I think we ought to do? I think we ought to paint the shed red. Does that sound like a motion? Does to me. Sounds like a proposal to take action, right? So as presiding officer, you might say, oh, you want to paint, you want to make that a motion, make that a formal motion. That helps move things along, right? So once somebody starts proposing that we do something, that we take some action, treat it as a motion, all right? It should be clearly stated, so you want to make sure that they clearly state it. So here's one of the things I say, is don't make negative motions. So a negative motion is what? It's a motion not to do something. What is a motion, though? It's up there. It's the first bullet point. It's a proposal to do something, right? So we don't need a motion not to do something that we're already not doing, okay? It just doesn't make sense. So avoid negative motions. But every now and then, people will make a motion not to do something, all right? So let's pretend that's happened. Motion's been made. It's been seconded, restated by the chair. We've had our discussion. We're ready to vote. You don't want to do what the person said we shouldn't do. How are you going to vote? You're going to vote yes or no? Right? It's confusing, right? Because you don't know whether you're going to vote yes on that motion or no on the motion because you don't want to do it, right? So it's confusing. And what happens if we vote on it and the motion not to do something fails? Now what? Does that mean we do what we said we weren't going to do? No, it doesn't mean that, but that's the kind of problem it creates when you make a negative motion. So everybody with me on that one? Don't make negative motions. And if you are on the board or council, when somebody makes a motion, ask the chair if we can reword it, okay? It's not that you're opposed to it. Can we get this reworded, right? The other one that you want to avoid is this term "so moved." Anybody ever heard that term "so moved"? What does that mean? What does that mean when somebody says "so moved"?
Whatever you said is
right.
Whatever the other guy said is, or if I want to make a motion, so moved. I'm just making the motion, but I'm not going to specify what I'm saying.
Right, right. It's what he said. What he said, right? So somebody does that, and then what happens in a meeting? What has happened, right? They vote on it, right? So I'll tell you, this happened to me. I was staff to a county economic development committee. So I was staff, and I wasn't on the committee. 5 county board members. Any county board members here? You can vouch that this happens once in a while. 5 county board members. They are discussing whether to support the formation of a county development corporation, a private not-for-profit group that's going to help promote economic development in the county. So we're at the meeting, gets to that item on the agenda, and one of the members says, you know, if we're going to do this, we need to get buy-in from the cities and villages in the county. So we should figure out a way to assess them based on their population or their assessed value. And somebody else said, well, if we're going to do that, we should have forums to teach people about what these are about so we can get their support. And another guy said, this is 5 county board, 5 guys on the county committee. Another one said, well, you know, the adjacent counties have economic development corporations already. Let's get their executive directors in here at these forums to tell us what to do. Now, I am staff, so my job at the meeting is to take minutes. I'm not participating in the discussion. I'm sitting, I'm listening, and at that point in the conversation, somebody said, "So moved," right? So what's my job? I got to make sure I get the motion down, right? So I start writing down the motion, and as I'm writing the motion down, somebody else said, "I second," and what did the chair do? Just as you said, chair calls for a vote. All in favor, say aye. All 5 of them said aye. They're ready to go on to the next agenda item. I said, wait a minute, let me make sure I got this right for the minutes. I read it back to them, and 3 of them said, yeah, that's what we voted on, and 2 of them said, no, that's not what we voted on, and they had to do it all over again, okay? So just remove those words, "so moved," and make sure that you clearly state what your motion is, okay? Everybody with me on that? Even if it's a simple thing. Just move for the approval of or to approve the auditor's report or accept the auditor's report, whatever it might be. All right, the third step in the process. So we obtained the floor, the motion's been made. The motion needs to be seconded. It needs to be done by another member. I cannot second my own motion, okay? A second simply means that it's worthy of debate. Doesn't mean I agree with it, just means I think it's worthy of debate. Yes?
There isn't any rule that the chair can't second the motion, is there?
That is correct, okay? So I will get to that, but I'll answer right now. The chair of small boards and committees. Now, for a large assembly, chairs typically would not do that. But for small boards and committees, meaning boards or committees of 12 members or less, the chair can make motions, can second motions, can enter into debate without stepping down from the chair, okay, and can also vote, okay? It's needed to advance, all right? So let's go to a couple questions here. We don't need the clickers for this one. What happens if the motion does not receive a second? It dies, right? It dies for lack of a second, right? And there's no need to ask 3 times, is there a second? Is there a second? There's no need, right? Somebody makes a motion to paint the shed red. I'm presiding officer. I might, probably doesn't happen on your councils and boards, but when I was on a city council, once in a while, we weren't paying close attention, right? So a motion gets made. I might want to say as presiding officer, a motion's been made to paint the shed red. Is there a second? You don't have to do that, but you might do that just to make sure everybody's heard it. Okay, hearing none, motion dies. Doesn't mean that we're done with that agenda item, but the motion dies because we don't have a second, all right? All right, I'm going to have you go to the polls here. So what happens if the motion does not receive a second, but debate takes place, and the motion is voted on and passes, okay? Is everybody with me on that? So we kind of lost track of things. Motion was made, and then all of a sudden, a debate starts, and we have discussion, and the chair completely forgets the fact that nobody made the second, and we have a vote. So what happens? What do you do if that happens? So A is the vote should be declared null and void prior to the next item of business being announced. B, the vote stands until someone draws attention to the mistake. C, the vote stands. And F, fire the presiding officer for allowing this to happen. Well, you don't have an F on your thing, so go ahead. What do you think? All right, I'm going to close the polls. Oh, look at that. Evenly split. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. You talk it over, and I'm going to let you vote again, and then we're going to see 100% of you get it right. Because you all know you're right, right? Right? You know you're right. You just have to convince the other people that they're wrong. So go ahead, take 30 seconds to do that, and I'll let you vote again. All right? Okay, you ready? No? All right. I'll let you vote again. Now, I see some of you are reaching for 2 clickers right now. Okay. All right. So go ahead, vote again, and we'll see what you come up with. All right, I'm going to close. Wait, I got one more abstention here. We had 15 before. But that's okay. You can abstain. I just confused you more. All right. So let's see what you came up with. Oh, look at that. All right. So let me take a little break here from parliamentary procedure and tell you about these clickers. Well, these clickers have been around now for about a dozen years, and they use them in college classrooms. In fact, some campuses, they require students to purchase one of these. They do have serial numbers on them, so you can track how people voted. Now, I'm not doing that tonight, so don't worry about that. But you can track how, so students they take quizzes with these. They do it for class participation scores and things like that, right? So when this is done in college campuses, the academics get a hold of this stuff, right? So they want to research what's the best way to use clickers. And one of the things they said is when there's disagreement, you let the group talk it over, and then they will come up with the right answer on their own, okay? What I've determined by doing that procedure with you folks is that you are really stubborn, okay? Right? Nobody changed. One person decided not to vote. I was trying to joke there. All right. So the correct answer, according to Roberts, is 5 of you did get it correct and the vote stands. Why do you suppose that is? Why do you suppose the vote stands? Anybody? Intent, right? There's intent there. Kind of gone through all of the, you've kind of gone through all of the steps, right? Because let's say that Kyle here makes a motion to paint the shed red. And I say, I'm on the board, Kyle, that's a crazy idea. We got a barrel full of white paint in the shed. Why would we want to paint it red, right? And now we go back and forth over whether we should paint the shed red or not. What have I done when I say that's a bad idea, Kyle? What have I basically said about his motion? That it's what? It's worthy of debate, right? It's worthy of discussion. So what Robert says in that case is that that vote was actually seconded, or that motion was actually seconded. And it was seconded when I started debate, okay? And Roberts refers to that as a de facto second. Now, what should have happened in that case? What should have happened when I started saying this is a bad idea? What should have happened?
The mayor should ask for a second.
The presiding officer should say, hey, wait a minute. We're not debating this yet. We need to get a second, right? So that's what should happen, right? But if it doesn't, the vote does still stand. And are there any clerks in the room? Yeah, so clerks are people that are taking minutes. So if you put in the minutes that it was a de facto second, nobody's going to know, right? So what you want to put in your minutes is that debate took place, right? So therefore, the motion was seconded that way. So make sure that you indicate the debate took place if nobody seconded. All right. Next step in the process is the chair restates the motion, probably the step that is most often skipped. So the chair should state, basically, it has been moved and seconded that we paint the shed red or whatever that motion is, okay? That's an important step that is most often skipped. So let me go to the next step, and that is when we go to debate. But I want to ask you this question. May debate or discussion take place when there is no motion pending, okay? So let's see what you say on this one. Go ahead and vote. Yes, but it depends on how many members are on the body. B, yes, but it depends on how controversial the topic is. And C, yes, in all circumstances. D, no. What do you think on that one? Haven't really covered this yet, but I gave you a hint. I gave you a hint when I talked about small boards and committees. And with that hint restated, you can vote again. It'll cancel out your previous vote if you want to revote. All right. I'll close the polls, see if you came up with, wow, you are really split group here, huh? Okay. So the correct answer is yes, you may have debate and discussion if it's a small board and committee, a small board or committee. That's one of those less formal rules under Roberts. So you may have debate and discussion. In fact, I will tell you, I think it's good policy to have debate and discussion before somebody makes a motion. Now, you can't let this drag on all night. That's not my point. But here's the problem. We often get to meetings and we have a subject matter on the agenda, right? And somebody maybe gives a report on that. We don't know what we're going to do about that issue or problem until we hear the report. And then maybe we want to have some discussion about what we want to do about it, right? Like I said before, we're having discussion and then somebody says, hey, you know what we ought to do is, right? I think that's okay. Because if we make motions without being well informed on the topic, what's going to happen? It's a bad motion, right? And then we have to amend it, and then we have to amend the amendment, and then we have to amend that again, right? And we just keep amending things until everybody loses track as to what we're voting on. So go ahead and figure out what it is you want to do in a small board and committee, and then get a motion that encompasses all that. You with me on that? I think this is how most boards operate anyway. It's good policy. But once in a while, or good practice, I should say, once in a while, you'll hear people say, hey, wait a minute, we can't discuss it because we don't have a motion pending. But that's incorrect for small boards and committees, all right? All right. You debate. So we're going to skip that one. Just want to take a quick side trip here on debate and discussion. When you're having debate and discussion, it's really important to be focused on the current issue. I tell this story to groups, and every time I tell it, I'm hoping no one in the group is going to nod their head, but almost every time I tell the story, there's people that nod their heads. Same county, Economic Development Committee, same group, vote comes up. I will tell you the truth, I don't remember what the vote was on, but I do remember one of the board members was in favor of it, but he voted against it. And I asked him after the meeting, why did you vote against it? It passed anyway. I asked him, why did you vote against it? I thought you were in favor of that. He said, I was. But Jack, same on the committee, voted against me at the hospital committee meeting last week, and I didn't want to support him this week, right? So, and what I hear people, what I see is people going like this every now and then, that people sort of carry these grudges, okay? Keep focused on the current issue, all right? The next step is putting it to a vote. So, you are presiding, and after lengthy debate, a member says, I call the question, what should you do? You should A, stare with amazement at the member who knows so much about parliamentary procedure. B, stop debate and take a vote. C, make sure the board is ready to vote. D, hand the gavel to the clerk because you don't know what to do. E, raise your eyebrows and ask, what should I call the question? What do you think here? I'm going to close the polls. All right. So the majority got this one correct, right? And the correct answer is make sure that the board is ready to vote, okay? There is a bit of mythology out there that's confirmed, right, by 5 of you that says we should stop debate and take a vote right now. But keep in mind that Roberts doesn't give any one person, not even the presiding officer, not even the chair, the ability to end debate on his or her own, okay? So if you are presiding and somebody says, I call the question, you know what they want to do, right? They want to end debate, but they can't do it on their own. So you don't just simply say, oh, Mark called the question, so now we need to vote. No. Now we need to check to see whether the board is ready to vote. And so as a presiding officer, I might say, well, Mark wants to end debate and vote now. Does anybody object? Okay, hearing no objection, we have unanimous consent to go ahead and end debate and vote. Okay? Everybody following that? That's unanimous consent. So let's try it again. Mark wants to end debate. Does anybody object? Oh yeah, okay, we have at least one person, that's all it takes, that objects. So now I would tell Mark, okay, Mark, we don't have unanimous consent, so please make a motion to end debate, okay? Motion to end debate. Roberts is called move the previous question. We don't need to worry about the exact language. Motion to end debate. It needs to be seconded, and it requires now the motion to end debate is not debatable, so we're not going to have discussion and debate on that, okay? But the motion to end debate requires a 2/3 vote, okay? 2/3 vote. So if you have a 5-member town board, and a motion is made to end debate, it's seconded, now we take the vote. How many does it take to end debate? How many have to vote in favor of that motion? 4, right? Because 3 is not quite 2/3, so it would take 4 of the 5, okay? All right, so you need to make sure the board is ready to vote. That's a pretty common error. I still hear this a lot. Somebody says I call the question, and everybody thinks, oh, we have to stop talking now and vote, okay? All right, and we've covered those. All right, let's try this one again. We're going to let you vote here. So we're going to take a look at this, okay? So you're the presiding. The main motion is to paint the shed. While the body is debating to amend the motion, you know what? Let's skip this one. Let's skip this one. We don't really have time to that. But the idea here is that if a motion is made to amend the main motion, we need to vote on the motion to amend first, right? And then depending on what happens, whether that passed or not, then we return to the main motion. It's kind of like nested cups, right? So we have to deal with each one of those in turn. All right. All right. So you can take votes in a variety of ways. You can have voice votes, right? Let's try something real quick here. So on a voice vote, you want to make sure that you take, what it says there, it says ask for votes on both sides, right? So you can have voice votes, you can have roll call votes, you can have a show of hands, whatever it might be, okay? Those are all fine in local government Wisconsin. But you want to make sure that no matter how the vote turned out, you ask for votes on both sides. So let's pretend we're some kind of weird governmental body here of whatever, 16 people, and we have to decide whether to paint the shed red or not, okay? So the motion has been made, it's been seconded, restated by the chair, we've had our discussion, we're ready to vote, okay? All in favor of painting the shed red, say aye. Okay, all opposed? Oh, this did not work at all. Okay, but you did well, this is my fault. So typically, when I ask all in favor of painting the shed red, I will hear a group of people say aye. But when I simply say all opposed, what I get is a smattering. I'll hear an aye, I will hear a nay, I will hear a no, and it's not at the same time. So to be fair, when you call for a voice vote, now on a 3-person town board, this isn't a big deal, but if you have to call for a vote when you have a larger group, because you're using your ears to determine whether the motion passed or not, all in favor of painting the shed red, say aye. Aye. All opposed to painting the shed red, say no. Okay, all right. Sort of worked, but some of you voted twice, didn't you? Okay, all right. All right. So you get the idea there. You want to give the opposition the opportunity to answer in chorus like you do those in favor. Everybody with me on that? Okay, all right. Let's go. So let's go to this quickly. A member of the Common Council, I just answered, we won't use the clickers. A member of the Common Council of the Village Board must vote unless the member has a conflict of interest. True or false? False. False. Nobody can be required to vote. You cannot be required to vote. Do we want people to vote? Do we expect them to vote? Do we expect them to represent their constituents? Yes. But you can't be required to vote, okay? A member of the Common Council or the Village Board must vote unless the member has a conflict of interest. We just did that one, right? What about if the municipality has its own rule requiring such? Are they required to vote? If the municipality has their own rule that requires them to do so, must they vote? True or false? False. Okay, once again, okay? Here's why. Here's why. It's okay. There was the City of Madison had it on their books that the alders had to vote unless they had a conflict of interest. And if they didn't, they had to pay a fine. And one of their alders took it through the court process, and there was a federal district court that sided with the alder, saying, no, you have a First Amendment right basically to keep your mouth shut as well as to speak, okay? So you can't be, even if you have it on your books, which some municipalities still do, you're not required to vote if you don't want to. We recommend that you do, we think you should, but you can't be required to. Yes?
Well, I've been at St. Croix County board meetings, and not recently this happened, but in the previous board, someone abstained, and they couldn't, the chair said you cannot abstain
Yeah, and that is incorrect. That was not, you don't have to state why you're abstaining. Now, if you have a conflict of interest, you should state that you have a conflict of interest. You don't have to say what it is. And you should, when should you say that? You have a conflict of interest, so you're not going to vote. When should you say that? You have a conflict of interest. But prior to it starting the discussion, right? My recommendation is leave the room. You don't have to. There's been the ethics board a long time ago. Their attorney said you're not required to. I think it's better if you do, but you're not required to. But you certainly want it on the record that you abstained because you had a conflict of interest. All right. And then the final thing is that the presiding officer should announce the results. Okay. I'm going to quickly go through a couple of these here. So we talked about this before. The chair of the committee. Does the chair of the committee vote? Yes, right? And can vote on all questions. And we're going to just quickly skip through a couple of these. All right. We've talked about many. Oh, one of these I do want to talk about is somebody not your intent. If you want to approve certain recommendations, then make a motion to approve those recommendations rather than the whole report. Final 3 points here. Quorum must vote. Okay. If you have a five-person board, right? How many does it take? How many need to be present in order to conduct business? Five-person town board, let's say. 3, right? So we have 3 present. Can we have it on the agenda to buy a pickup truck for the Parks Department? 5-member board, 3 are present, 2 vote in favor of buying the truck, 1 votes opposed. Do we buy the truck? Yes, right? It's a legal meeting. We had 3 people. It was a majority, 2 to 1 vote, right? 5-person board, 3 are present. 1 has a conflict of interest. What might a conflict of interest be on buying a pickup truck for the Parks Department? Yeah, right? They own the dealership, right? So you have a 3-person board, and now one of them has a conflict of interest, so you only have 2 remaining that can vote. So now you can't take a vote. That could not be a legal vote, all right? We've already talked about not being required to vote and that conflicts of interest must be disclosed, all right? All right, can you discuss items not on the agenda during a board meeting, yes or no? Yes, how about A, as long as we don't take action? No. I hear that again. That's another one of those things I hear because there's still folks that are perpetuating this myth. Under the open meetings law, you're not allowed to discuss something unless it's on the notice, okay? Even if you're not, whether you take action or not, you're not allowed to discuss it. All right, let me quickly go to one more. This is one I get from some clerks. Does the town chairman's wife have the right to get up during the meeting and explain things for her husband? Our chairperson's wife does this at every meeting. No, she does not. All right. All right. The last one. I get this question often. And it's appropriate for this time of night. We're ready to, we're at the end of our agenda. We're at that item that says adjourn. Do we need to vote on adjourning? No, you don't need to vote. Sometimes I get this question. Do we need to vote on adjourning? No. I mean, what would happen if everybody voted no? What would you do then, right? Okay. So can you make a motion to adjourn at other times during the meeting? Yes, you may, okay? But once you get to the end of the agenda, your business is done. The chairperson can say, okay, there's no further business before us because of the open meetings law, right? Meeting's adjourned, okay? And then you're done. Then you can all go home. Doesn't mean you can all go to the tavern and discuss the business from the meeting, all right? Okay. And with that, Thomas, I think I'll turn it back over to you, and we can, unless there's quick questions or not, but we said we'd end by 8:45, and we're at 8:55 here. They write their own. Yeah.
Surprise.
Yes. And state legislature does too. State legislature has their own rules also. All right.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. All right.